Hello. Well, I'm finally going to update the video I recorded many years ago with my Ancestry DNA results. Way back when I had asked the question, and a lot of people gave me a lot of answers and what they thought was the issue. But now it's been many years later. I've got a lot of updates from Ancestry. I've even gone to other companies and sent my DNA to Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage, Living DNA, a lot of different companies. It's a lot better now. The results are a lot closer. It is an estimate. The ethnicity is an estimate. Way back during that first video, besides the autosomal DNA, I had mentioned I had my Y DNA and my mitochondrial DNA tested. And I had those tested with a company that now doesn't even exist. It was really a long time ago. But during that video, I had mentioned my Y DNA was I1, and I'd like to correct that. It's not. There's other companies that do a real good job now, like Family Tree DNA and Living DNA. My Y DNA is actually G2A is the haplogroup, and the subclad is GL91. That just so happens to be the same haplogroup and subclad as Otzi the Iceman. So either over here or over there somewhere, I'm going to put a picture of my cousin Otzi and myself, and you can see if we resemble each other or not. Of course, he was around 5,300 years ago. You know, Y DNA, fathers, 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 goes all the way back, keeps going back. Okay, back to the autosomal DNA. Ancestry, way back when I did the first video. Oh, and by the way, I'll put a link down below for the original video if anyone wants to watch it. If you haven't seen it, you can click on that and take a look at the first video made many, many years ago. But way back when, they were doing their estimates on different ethnicities. And on my test results, it showed sub-Saharan African, Nigeria. So it showed Nigeria. And then I had my children, their spouses, a lot of family members had their DNA tested. And one of my daughters, it came back Senegal. Okay, well, another daughter, Nigeria. I had Nigeria. She got the Nigeria from me. But one said Senegal. And my wife and I, neither one of us in our DNA results showed Senegal. So I asked the question, where did Senegal come from for my daughter? I don't know. And then a lot of people answered what they thought could be a reason why. But anyway, now with the latest results and the last few updates, quite a few last updates, Senegal doesn't show up. As a matter of fact, for my brother, my daughters, myself, all of us, it shows the Western Bantu people. So there's no issue with how can something show up that neither parent has. So my kids received the sub-Saharan African from me, which happens to be, according to Ancestry, the Western Bantu people. What I'd like to do is get in a little bit. I looked into the Western Bantu people, very curious. So I could talk a little bit about the Bantu people. The Ancestry website tells you a little bit about the Bantu people, just a few paragraphs. And I was an engineer for many years, and I'm one for details. I like to know a lot more than just a few paragraphs. So I'm going to learn as much as I can about the Bantu people. But anyway, what Ancestry had stated, they had to mention, of course, the Great Migration of the Bantu people. If you go back in time, around 3,000 years or so, and there's different documents that will say 3,000, 4,000 at different time frames, but a lot of people agree on 3,000 years ago, the migration started. It originated, and again, has some debate on where it originated, but originated around the border of Nigeria and Cameroon. And so they started heading east, and then after a while they split as part of them kept traveling east and some had started heading south. Now my DNA said Western Bantu people. So my DNA shows it comes from those that were heading down south along the Atlantic coast of Africa. Those that were heading east, they went about as far as they could before they hit the ocean. They went to the Great Lakes area. It took them, I think, about 1,000 years to get to the Great Lakes. That's if you take into consideration about 25 years per generation. It was about 40 generations of moving east towards, they went Uganda, Kenya. Then they started heading south. And the traveling migration heading south from the Great Lakes area was a lot faster. While it took 1,000 years for them to go from the original location to the Great Lakes area, it only took them maybe 500 years to end up all the way down to South Africa, actually. So they were in South Africa about the time frame of 300 or 500 AD. On the western side, when you look at the migration, they were heading south, and they really only went as far as just the northern part of Namibia. So Angola is in there, and I'm going to talk more about Angola because I'm a U.S. citizen, an American, and we have a little something to do with Angola and the very first slaves that entered what became the United States, and they were Western Bantu people. So I'm going to go a little bit more detail on that. The Bantu people are an ethnic linguistic grouping of people with about 400 different ethnicities and between 500 and 600 different languages that are Bantu languages. You can see in this picture here of the continent of Africa in purple, it shows where the Bantu speaking people are. And you can see it's about a third of the continent. So it's a good size of the continent. Also, there's about 350 million people that speak Bantu, and this is probably over 20-some countries out of the 54 countries in the African continent. Many of the languages are similar, so someone that speaks, say, Swahili, listen to someone that was speaking Lingala, would understand probably a good part of what they're saying. Looking at this map, if you look at the upper right where it says Swahili, and you start heading west, and then look a little north, you see Lingala. That's quite a distance. So if someone that spoke Swahili traveled all the way, say in Kenya, they traveled all the way to Congo, they could understand someone that's speaking Lingala. One way we can compare the two different Bantu languages, Swahili and Lingala, see how they're the same or different. We could go ahead and just count to 10 in each language, and you can see how similar or different they are. So as an example, in Swahili, 1 to 10 would be moja, mbili, tatu, nne, tano, sita, saba, nane, tisa, and kumi. If you wanted to keep going, 11, 12, 13, you just take 10, add 1, that'd be 11, 10, add 2, so it'd be like kumi na moja would be 11. Now in Lingala, 1 to 10 would be moko, mibale, misatu, minai, mitano, mutoba, sambo, mwambi, libwa, and zumi. Zumi, kumi, they're close. Moja, moko. Some of the numbers are very similar, but then again, Some of them are not. Like take the number 6 in Swahili, sita, motoba, sita, motoba. So there's some differences. Anyway, and a lot of it is very similar. And from one language to another, Bantu language, there's a lot of parts of it that are understandable. Before we go much farther, I'd like to go ahead and apologize for any mispronunciation of words. I do not speak Swahili. I do not speak Lingala. I'm lucky to get English words out, and that's the only language I know is English. Okay, it's time to update this update. I just paused a little bit, looked back to see what I was talking about and what I said, and I heard me say something about when America became America, the first African slaves that set foot on the land of what became America. That's not true. Stop and think about Florida. Florida is part of America. Well, that belonged to Spain for a long time. And there were slaves in Florida back in the 1500s, probably as far back as 1565. So what I meant to say was the first African enslaved people that set foot in Virginia, or what was the English colonies at that point in time, which is 1619. And I want to get into that now. That'll be the last thing I talk about. I think I'm talking a lot. So I want to get into that just a little bit. Since Ancestry showed that I have DNA that's from the Western Bantu people, and the first African slaves that set foot in Virginia were Western Bantu people, I feel a little association with that. So I want to talk just a little bit about where they were taken from in Africa, where they were kidnapped, I guess you could say, and how they got to Virginia. The location that we're talking about, looking at the continent of Africa, is down here in this area. This is the modern day Angola. Down below in yellow is highlighted the Ndongo Kingdom. That's where the Mbundu people that spoke Kimbundu, which happens to be a Western Bantu language, were located. Here's a map of Angola showing where some of the Bantu languages are spoken. If you look up just under the green up near the top, you see the yellow. It says the Kimbundu. That's where the Africans were taken from that went to Virginia from the yellow area. Off to the left, you can see the capital, Luanda. It's a old Portuguese settlement from the 1500s. I used Google Maps, and between Luanda and Malanje is about 380 kilometers. And records show that they were taken east of Luanda about 200 miles, no, miles and kilometers. So if you convert the kilometers to miles, it looks like they were just about in the middle of where the yellow is, west of Malanje and due east of Luanda. The captives were then forced to march the almost 200 miles to Luanda before they boarded the ships that ended up in Virginia. The record said about 30% of them died on the march just to get to Luanda. After the captives made it to Luanda, those that survived, they, after a while, they boarded a ship called the San Juan Bautista. Well, actually, some documents gives it the Portuguese name and some gives it the Spanish name, so I'll just say the Spanish name. But the ship, San Juan Bautista, had a license to carry 200 slaves. So they put 350 slaves on the ship, which was 150 more than it should have ever had. On their voyage to Veracruz. It's where they were originally going to go. Probably about 40% of the captives died on the way. And just before they got to Veracruz, a couple of ships, one called the Treasurer and one called the White Lion, they were like pirates, English pirates with Dutch flags that gave them the right to do this sort of a thing. But anyway, they boarded what they thought would be a ship that had gold and silver, and instead it had slaves. So the White Lion went ahead and took 20 some odd slaves, and the treasurer took the rest, up to about a total of 60 slaves. Then after they did that, they started heading north along the coast, excuse me, along the coast up to Virginia. The first ship to set anchor was the White Lion. And it was the White Lion that 20-some captives first set foot on Virginia soil. A couple days later, the treasurer came by, and they only dropped off 2 or 3 captives, and the rest were taken to, I believe, the Bahamas. I'm really talking a lot. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop my update at this point in time. So anyway, here's the update. It only took I don't know how many years, and maybe in 30 years I'll update again. Talk to you all later. Bye.